The Peruvian National Police units entered San Marcos University campus to disperse demonstrators who had arrived 3 days ago to support protests against Dina Boluarte's government. In Spain, demonstrators rallied in Madrid's Plaza Cibeles to protest against the government of Pedro Sánchez. And Lebanon experiences a new day of protests following the increase in the exchange rate of its local currency and its inflationary effects. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Mados from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Peru, the National Police entered the campus of the San Marcos University to evict students and provincial delegations gathered in the area as part of the anti-government protests. Police officers entered with violence and subdued the students and social leaders who had organized the university campus to host the caravans of indigenous communities that arrived in the capital for the massive protests against the Peruvian government. According to reports from some of the demonstrators, the police detained several of them. However, an exact number is not known. San Marcos University was taken over by students with the permission of the university authorities on January 17th, in solidarity with the people who have been protesting against the government and Congress of the Republic. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Christian Salazar, described as unacceptable the death of over 52 people during police repression in anti-government protests in Peru. In the context of his visit to the South American country, the senior official of the international organization held a meeting with the congressional leadership and Prime Minister Alberto Tarola, during which Salazar advocated immediate measures to prevent the recurrence of such events. Likewise, he called for opening of forceful investigations on these cases. Salazar also condemned the stigmatization of the demonstrators by Peruvian authorities, who have labeled them as terrorists, while stressing the need to guarantee the right to protest by Peruvian state. On Friday, Bolivian President Luis Arce called on the country's social organizations to be on the alert against a possible coup attempt. He made the statement at the opening session of the new board of directors of the Mixed Miners Union of Huanuni, west of the country. President Arce recalled the events of 2019, which toppled then President Evo Morales. Arce said this time they will not be taken by surprise. Arce's warning comes a few days prior to the so-called national meeting summoned by extreme right-wing organizations whose leaders, for the most part, were involved in the 2019 coup against Morales, which left more than 30 people dead, over 500 wounded, and 1,800 detained and tortured. Brazil's justice system is preparing to prosecute around 1,000 people for their involvement in January 8th riots. The detainees face multiple charges on anti-democratic acts. According to federal police, these include criminal association, attempt to subvert the democratic order, participation in a coup attempt, and incitement to commit a crime. Among the most serious offenses, participation in a coup attempt carries a possible sentence of up to 12 years in prison, according to the Brazilian Penal Code. On Monday, the prosecution filed its first charges against 39 suspected participants in the attacks. It will ultimately be up to Judge Morai to decide who will remain in prison awaiting trial. The delegations of the Colombian government and the National Liberation Army have announced that the second round of peace negotiations will start on February 13th, with Mexico as the host country. The announcement was made Saturday after a meeting of the guarantor countries in the Aquiles Nassau Cultural Center in Caracas, Venezuela, by representatives of the guarantor countries and the church. The statement praises the work of Venezuela during the first round of negotiations and the importance of incorporating the civil society to the construction of the peace process and a bilateral ceasefire. On his part, Colombian government negotiator Oti Patiño said that the delegations will evaluate progress made at this first round of talks and will raise the issue of citizen participation at the second round of talks. In Colombia, the Humanitarian Caravan order taken by the government and a representation of the National Liberation Army in the Pacific region concluded on Saturday. The caravan began on January 17th with the goal of learning about the situation suffered by indigenous and Afro-descendant communities in the towns of Bajo Calima, in the department of Valle del Cauca, and Medio San Juan, department of Choco. During this mobilization, representatives from these communities shared their realities, which will allow to establish the conditions to overcome forced confinement in the near future due to the increase in violence in the regions. Upon ending the caravan, the government and the National Liberation Army delegates presented a report that will help to adopt measures for the communities at risk in the Pacific region. Let us take a short break, but first remember you can follow us on TikTok at the account at teleSUR English, in which you'll be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and much more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back from the south. In Spain, people are demonstrating at the Cibeles Square in Madrid against the government of Pedro Sánchez and in defense of the Constitution. People were rallied by several social organizations like Spain's Civic Forum, the Freedom and Alternative Foundation, all with the support of the Popular Party and other political organizations. Demonstrators accused Sánchez of being a liar, a traitor, and for acting against democracy. People have also voiced their rejection of the government's policies like amendments to the Penal Code regarding crimes of sedition and embezzlement for
Democratic regimes can mutate without military uprisings into collectivist populism in which the essence of liberal democracy is dismantled. Regimes in which the separation of powers, the rule of law, fundamental rights or freedom of enterprise become mere caricatures. Pedro Sánchez is manipulating the justice. Isn't going to be independent anymore. The Constitutional Court isn't going to be independent anymore, and he's taking over all the institutions. And this isn't good for Spain, nor democracy, nor anybody, and especially not for the future of our children and grandchildren.
A dozen youth organizations marched through Paris on Saturday to show their anger over the government's pension reform. Actively supported by far-left party France's Unbound Party, they were hoping to capitalize on the success of the massive inter-union march and strike on Thursday. Unbound leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon congratulated demonstrators on his Twitter page, saying that over 150,000 people turned out. The turnout was also praised by the Colin Champion, president of the La Voix Lycéenne Union, while L'Alternative, another student union, welcomed a very massive youth turnout. More determined than ever to keep the pressure on the government, the unions announced a new day of protest scheduled for January 31st.
I think it's a question of justice. That is to say, they tell us that we have to cut somewhere to have money to be able to finance other pensions because supposedly we are too many. But in fact, the money is there. It's in the super profits and in many other things. For me, it's a question of the choices they are making. They are going to look for the money where they think it is easier to find it. That is to say, in the social sector. I am an ecologist, and I think we should work less and also for less time to reduce the production of superficial and very polluting goods, and also that we should have more time to devote to a social and environmental commitment, to take care of each other, to educate ourselves. I have the feeling that the stress and fatigue generated by work, we tend to buffer it by overconsumption.
In Germany, citizens took to the streets in the country's capital to demand fairer prices for producers, a more sustainable agriculture, and the redistribution of public wealth. In the framework of the Green Week, the Agricultural and Environmental Alliance, We Have Had Enough, took to the streets to demand measures against the climate crisis, the protection of biodiversity, and the end of genetic engineering in agriculture. A convoy of trucks led the demonstration, with protesters marching through the government district of Berlin in animal costumes, holding pots and pans in their hands. And we have more news coming up after a short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the south. In Lebanon, a new day of protest is taking place in response to the increase in the local currency exchange rate and its inflationary consequences. This Saturday, demonstrators blocked the country's main highways and roads to demand a solution to the economic crisis. Citizens denounced the increase in fuel prices, decrease in purchasing power in the country, deterioration of its economic situation, and the increase in the nation's cost of living. Demonstrations started after the exchange rate of the dollar in the country's informal market exceeded 50,000 Lebanese pounds. A According to the United Nations, over 2 million people in Lebanon currently require urgent economic assistance as a result of monetary depreciation that prevents families from accessing food and basic necessities. New Zealand's Police and Education Minister Chris Hipkins will replace Jacinda Ardern as Prime Minister after emerging as the only candidate nominated to lead the ruling Labour Party. The senior politician must now be formally backed by Labour members of Parliament on Sunday to take over as the country's 41st Prime Minister following Ardern's resignation. First elected to Parliament for the Labour Party in 2008, Hipkins became a household name fronting the government's response to the pandemic after being appointed Minister for COVID-19 in November 2020. The soon-to-be New Zealand's Premier, who is currently Minister for Police, Education and Public Service, as well as leader of the House of Representatives, will lead his party in the general elections on October 14th this year. Nigeria's health authorities confirmed a deadly outbreak of diphtheria on Saturday. In Kano State, one of the worst-hit states in the country's north, the Health Commission recorded more than 70 suspected cases along with 25 deaths related to the bacterial infection. The total number of confirmed cases and deaths is not yet known. The nation's Center for Disease Control and Prevention revealed it initiated an emergency response to the outbreak and is monitoring the situation in 4 of the country's 36 states. According to Kano State Chief Epidemiologist, authorities were first alerted about an outbreak among children in late December. Diphtheria causes breathing difficulties, heart failure, and paralysis. The people most at risk are unvaccinated or those who live in areas with poor sanitation. Burkina Faso military authorities report the release of 66 women and 4 babies kidnapped by terrorist groups. Women and children were taken to Ouagadougou, capital of the country. They had been kidnapped since last Thursday in Arnpinda village in the north of the African nation while searching for food and supplies. The military report confirms that after an intense air and ground search, they were reportedly spotted in Tuguri area. After undergoing a medical examination, they will be interrogated to find out if their testimony could help in the arrest of the extremists. In China, the death toll from an avalanche in Tibet rose to 28 after rescue teams ended the search for victims. Local authorities say 53 people were rescued alive, 5 of them with serious injuries, and official report says the avalanche was caused by a combination of strong winds and rising temperatures in the area. The accident took place at 7 p.m. local time on Tuesday at a tunnel exit on a highway located in Medoc County, trapping several vehicles. More than 1,300 personnel were involved in the search and rescue efforts, which wrapped up Friday, 5:30 p.m. local time. On Friday, the northeastern city of Sambaba in Madagascar was hit under water drought by tropical storm Shineso. According to preliminary official reports, 1 person is missing and some 300 people have been evacuated. More than 700 houses have been flooded. The regions of Diana, Saba, and Ananihirofo were placed under red alert. Tropical storm Shineso made landfall in the north of Antalaha town in the Sabah region on the northeastern coast of the island on January 19th. Then the storm headed southwest with average wind of 90 km per hour and wind gusts of up to 120 km per hour. This is Madagascar's first tropical storm for the 2022-2023 cyclone season, which runs from October to April. The Chilean government decided to extend for 1 month the state of emergency implemented in a sector of Viña del Mar city affected by a wildfire. According to the Minister of the Interior and Public Security, Carolina Toja, the extension is given after the conditions that caused the wildfire still persist. According to the government official, 2 people died, more than 1,000 were affected, and around 300 houses were damaged, many of them completely destroyed as a result of the fire. The blaze began on December 22nd in the area known as Santa Agua, and due to the drought and the strong winds, it spread rapidly and reduced more than 100 hectares to ashes. The government provided emergency financial assistance to the families and implemented a support system to restore houses, considering the degree of damage caused by the flames. And we have come to the end of this newsbrief, and you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.